The fact is, my best friend Sabrina's child is already a year old. So please, sign these divorce papers. In a sterile, all-white hospital room, just 2 hours before my brain tumor surgery was scheduled to begin, those were the words that came from my husband's mouth. The air in the room, thick with the sharp smell of disinfectant and filled only by the steady beep of the EKG monitor, instantly froze. However, Grayson, my husband, who stood beside my bed with a smirking, false smile, had no idea that in a few days, he himself would lose absolutely everything and experience the greatest hell and despair of his life. From outside the window, the calm morning light streamed in as usual. My name is Eleanor Vance. I am 45 years old this year. I have been married to Grayson for 15 years. Although we were not blessed with children, I believed we had lived peaceful days side by side. At least, that's what I believed. 6 months ago, after suffering from frequent, severe headaches and unbearable dizziness, I was diagnosed with a brain tumor. In the midst of a despair that made my world feel pitch black, I managed to find a renowned surgeon, and finally, the day of my long-awaited operation in New York City arrived. Although the doctor said the success rate was high, it was still a major operation that would involve opening my skull. Last night, I couldn't sleep a wink due to fear, and the cold IV line was still attached to my arm. The sound of the sliding door opening was heard, and my husband Grayson walked into the room. I had only thought he was coming to calm my anxious heart before the surgery. I had hoped he would hold my hand one last time and say, "Fight hard, I'll be waiting for you." However, seeing Grayson's appearance, I couldn't believe my eyes. On the morning his wife was to undergo a life-threatening major surgery, he was wearing a meticulously tailored, brand-name suit, as if he were going to a fancy restaurant. His hair was perfectly styled as if he had just left a salon, and he exuded a sweet, strong cologne completely unsuited for a hospital. "Gray, why are you dressed like that? Didn't you take time off work?" I asked in a hoarse voice. Without a hint of guilt, Grayson sat firmly in the steel chair beside the bed. "Ah, this? Of course, I'm not going to work. Today is a very special anniversary for me. Our wedding anniversary was last month, wasn't it?" "That's none of your business," Grayson cut in, laughing cynically. He then took a piece of paper out of his expensive leather bag and thrust it in front of me. "The fact is, my best friend Sabrina's child is already a year old. Today is his birthday. So please, sign this." My mind went blank. Sabrina was my best friend since high school. When I was diagnosed, she was the first one to cry for me. "I'll support Gray in your place, Eleanor," she had said, gripping my hand tightly. I see now what she meant. Ignoring my speechlessness, unbelievable sentences continued to flow from Grayson's mouth. "You're about to have your head operated on. The doctor said the success rate is high, but there's always a worst-case scenario, right? If you don't wake up again, it'll be a hassle for me and Sabrina to get married. So, sign it here, now." I couldn't make a sound. His words were so cruel. The beeping of my heart monitor quickened slightly. I just stared at the man before me. Before a great rage could surface, my brain couldn't process the strangeness of the husband who had been with me for 15 years, and I could only remain silent. Perhaps mistaking my silence for shock and depression, Grayson became even more brazen with his foul words. "Besides, we've been married for 15 years, and you couldn't even give me a child. On top of that, a brain tumor. As a wife, you're a failure. Sabrina, though, she's the best. She's young and fresh and even gave me a handsome son, an heir. Thanks to Sabrina, my dignity as a man is preserved. You, as her friend, should be happy for her, right? A failure." The word echoed in the cold hospital room. I took a slow, deep breath. I bit my trembling lip with all my might and tried to keep my head, which felt like it was boiling with rage, as cool as if it were doused in ice water. "Is that so?" After a long silence, the words that came from my mouth were in a voice that was strangely cold and calm. Even I was surprised. "Huh?" Grayson let out a confused sound at my unexpected reaction. "All right, I'll sign." I moved my trembling right hand with all my strength, grabbed the pen on the side table, and wrote my name clearly on the divorce papers. "Oh, good. In that case, I'm going home. I have to prepare for dinner. Ah, by the way, I hope your surgery is successful." Grayson gleefully snatched the signed divorce papers and left the room with a light step, as if he were skipping, without a single glance back. Staring at the tightly closed door, a cold smile formed on my face. Not a single tear fell. I only felt a fire burning quietly but fiercely in the depths of my heart. "Grayson, you've made a fatal mistake. Whose money do you think allows you to send a monthly allowance to your parents back home? Whose money do you think allows you to buy that expensive suit you're wearing? Miss Vance, it's time. "We're heading to the operating room," a nurse said. The sound of the gurney's wheels began to echo in the quiet corridor. "My revenge will begin the moment I survive this surgery." My consciousness slowly emerged from a deep sea of anesthesia. When I opened my heavy eyelids, at the end of my blurry vision, I saw a sterile white ceiling and an IV line. A dull, throbbing pain was felt throughout my head, but I was truly still alive. "Miss Vance, can you hear me?" The surgery was a great success. The calm voice of my attending physician reached my ears. I responded by blinking slowly. Miraculously, there were no lingering side effects, and the tumor that had been lodged in my brain was cleanly removed. The fact that I was alive again strengthened the quiet but fierce determination for revenge burning within me. Lying in bed during the total post-operative recovery period, I reflected on my 15 years of married life. My husband, Grayson, was a mid-level employee at a respectable private company. He didn't have a high position, and his monthly salary alone wouldn't have been enough to pay the rent for our luxury apartment in downtown New York, let alone buy the designer suits he wore even to the hospital and go out for expensive drinks every night. That was completely impossible. However, he had made a huge misunderstanding. The luxurious life he led was entirely thanks to my hidden assets. In fact, my late father was a real estate mogul who had built his fortune from scratch. As his only child, I inherited most of his assets and several premium properties. Currently, just from the rental income of apartments and office buildings, I earn a six-figure income every month. In addition, I also run a solid investment business personally. However, in order not to hurt Grayson's fragile ego, I hid the fact that I made a lot of money from the beginning of our marriage. I always covered the shortfall in living expenses by transferring money from my private account to our joint account, making it seem as if we could live lavishly on Grayson's income alone. Because I was mostly at home like a housewife, Grayson truly believed that this luxurious life was all thanks to his company. Not only that, Grayson's parents ran a small business in their hometown in Pennsylvania. But 5 years ago, their business was on the verge of bankruptcy. I was the one who saved my in-laws, who were in deep debt and almost living like fugitives. Using my personal assets, I paid off their $250,000 debt in one lump sum and continued to send a monthly allowance of $2,500 directly from my account to my in-laws' account. A few years ago, when we went home for Thanksgiving in their old drafty house, my mother-in-law looked at me coldly and said, "Eleanor, you can't even have children, yet you continue to live comfortably off Grayson's salary. Why don't you try working? All our relatives' wives work to support their households." When I just remained silent at those words, Grayson, sitting next to me, instead of defending me, laughed cynically and agreed with his mother. "It's all right, Mom. She's like a leech who can't live without my income. It's me, with my generous heart, who supports her. She's a useless wife, I know, but please just tolerate her." A leech. Useless. Listening to those words, I just calmly sipped my tea. I didn't even have the interest to reply. They would probably never know in their lifetime that the lavish Thanksgiving dinner on the table and the new clothes my in-laws wore at that time were all secretly arranged and paid for by me. And Sabrina, my best friend whose name Grayson mentioned in the hospital room, we had been friends since high school, and she had always been a woman who loved luxury and had a strong desire to show off. When I married Grayson, on the surface, she congratulated me, but I remember seeing a hint of jealousy in her eyes. I never thought that jealousy was so deeply twisted that it would lead her to steal my husband and even have an illegitimate child who was already a year old. Those two, who rashly cast me aside for a child without realizing how great a loss it was to lose their biggest source of money. Are they now fantasizing that my surgery failed and that a little insurance money would become theirs, while celebrating their victory? A week after the surgery, I recovered smoothly and was moved to a general ward. Once I was strong enough to walk on my own, I immediately picked up the phone by my bed. The goal was to contact my personal lawyer, who had been managing my assets for a long time. After briefly explaining the situation over the phone, the lawyer, whom I had known for a long time, took a deep breath and then replied strongly, "I understand, Miss Vance. I will immediately handle the termination of transfers to your in-laws' account, the blocking of credit card use, and the preparation of a lawsuit for damages for infidelity. We will take them down completely." I nodded deeply at those words. All right, the preparations for the counterattack are complete. The countdown to the moment they realize the truth and are thrown into the depths of despair has begun. As I thought that and placed the phone on the bedside table, a soft knock was heard on the quiet room door. It was still too early for the nurse's visit. Who could be coming at dusk? when visiting hours were almost over. Please, come in. After I answered briefly, the door slid open. Seeing the face of the person who entered, I unconsciously held my breath and clenched the blanket tightly. Someone who absolutely should not have come here. No. Someone whose face I least wanted to see was standing at the threshold of the room with a cunning smile. Well, Eleanor, you survived after all. What a pity. Along with the nauseating scent of perfume, the air in the hospital room froze again because of that person's words. The person standing at the door of the hospital room was Sabrina, my best friend since high school. In the midst of the cold early March wind that was still rattling the window panes, she wore a bright pink dress as if welcoming spring early. In her hand, she carried a flashy, foreign luxury brand handbag. Although her friend had just undergone major surgery, she brought no gifts, just stood at the doorway with a cold, condescending smile. Well, Eleanor, you survived after all? What a pity. The first words she uttered were full of extraordinary poison and malice, not like words addressed to an old friend. On the bed, I slowly raised my upper body and just stared calmly at her face. Before a great rage, what came was a sense of disgust and revulsion at how low a human being could become. Sabrina, why are you here? To my very calm question, Sabrina approached the bed with the noisy, annoying sound of her high heels and sat down unceremoniously in the steel chair that Grayson had just occupied. Why, you ask? You heard from Gray, didn't you? We have a cute son. He's already 1 year old. I came today to tell you that, and to ask you to let Gray go immediately. Sabrina took out the latest model smartphone from her bag and arrogantly showed me the screen. On it was a photo of Grayson, Sabrina, and a boy of about 1 year old with a wide smile. The background was the lobby of a luxury hotel in New York. On the table was a lavish meal, and on Grayson's wrist, the luxury watch worth tens of thousands of dollars that I had once given him as a birthday present sparkled shamelessly. Gray is so happy, you know. He said he's so glad to have finally found a young, beautiful woman who could give him an heir. Unlike a barren woman like you. Eleanor, as a fellow woman, you must understand my feelings, right? The ultimate happiness of giving birth to a child from the person you love and raising him well. Barren. The word was like a sharp, cold knife that tore through the quiet air of the hospital room. The friend who used to cry and comfort me when I was physically and mentally broken from fertility treatments was now laughing, while digging into that most sensitive and deep wound with all her might. I swallowed all words of protest down my throat and just stared at Sabrina with a cold gaze, maintaining absolute silence. My silence was probably taken by Sabrina as a sign of total defeat. She became more animated and continued to hurl a series of cruel insults. Besides, at 45 and with a brain tumor, you're finished as a woman. Gray often complains at home. He says you have no appeal as a woman, and now you're seriously ill, just a burden. Your hair was shaved for the surgery, right? With such a pathetic and ugly appearance, how dare you still show your face to Grayson? Don't you have any self-respect as a woman? Sabrina's merciless verbal abuse did not stop. I took a calm, deep breath. Outside the window, the plum tree with its still hard buds swayed violently in the stormy wind. The real spring was still some way off. The cold March air was very similar to the state of my frozen heart. Eleanor, you have nothing left. Youth, health, a child, and the great husband you love, I've taken them all. Ah, that's right. I heard from Gray. You signed the divorce papers right away, didn't you? Thank you so much. With this, we can finally cut this troublesome tie, and the three of us can become a real family. Sabrina laughed arrogantly and crossed her legs gracefully. So, when are you getting out of this hospital? Gray said, before you come home. He's going to throw out all your things in that apartment. He said in our glorious new life, your old things are completely unnecessary. He's so excited, he's going to call a moving service soon and throw them out as trash. I frowned slightly. That penthouse in the city center was bought in cash with my personal assets. The name Grayson listed on the title deed was only a temporary measure to protect his small ego and allow him to show off to others. The actual ownership and the obligation to pay maintenance fees were all mine. My lawyer must have already taken firm steps behind the scenes. But these two pathetic people in front of me were completely unaware of the bitter reality that awaited them. Sabrina, I broke the long silence and opened my mouth very calmly. Do you really think you can be happy this way? Hearing my overly calm voice, Sabrina's expression hardened for a moment, but she quickly laughed cynically again. Of course, Gray is an elite manager at a top company. Every month he gives me a lot of shopping money, and whatever branded goods I want, he'll buy them without complaining. He has a huge income, too good for a simple and boring woman like you. From now on, I will live the most luxurious life with my son with all that money. A luxurious life? Hearing those words, I almost burst out laughing and answered, holding back by clenching my jaw. Grayson's small salary as a regular employee was very limited. The designer bags Sabrina was showing off, and the cost of fun at the hotel were all from the money flowing from my account to him. In that case, enjoy it while you can. When I said that with ice-cold words, Sabrina's face turned very unpleasant. You sore loser. Just enjoy your lonely and pathetic old age. We won't pay a penny in damages, so be prepared for that. Sabrina said as if spitting, then stood up quickly and was about to leave the room, stomping her shoes hard. But as her hand touched the doorknob, she suddenly stopped, looked back, and smiled very wickedly. Ah, I forgot something important. Gray said this weekend he's going to visit your parents' grave. Of course, with me and our son. He said he's going to report properly to your parents that the three of us are becoming a new family. Such a good and sincere husband, right? Hearing their insane intention to trample on the sacred resting place of my late parents, something crucial inside me snapped with a cracking sound. This alone, I will never forgive. After Sabrina left the room satisfied, I grabbed my phone again. There was no time to delay. I searched for a name from my contact list and pressed the call button without hesitation. The time had come to mobilize the person they feared most. After Sabrina left the room, I gripped the phone tightly in my hand. I would not let such vile people approach the sacred resting place where my parents lay. I called the head of our family's church, an old friend of my late father, from my contact list. Reverend, it's been a while. This is Eleanor. Actually, there's a bit of a problem. I explained the situation briefly and accurately. That my husband planned to come to my parents' grave this weekend with his mistress and their illegitimate child, and that I was currently in the process of divorcing them, and absolutely did not want them to enter the cemetery grounds. On the other end of the phone, the Reverend growled low and answered in a voice trembling with anger. What an insolent man. He knows how much your father adored you, Eleanor, yet he dares to do such a despicable thing. I will not let them set foot on this holy ground. Rest assured. This weekend, the cemetery gates will be closed tight. And besides interested parties, no one will be allowed in. If they force their way in, I've arranged for the police to be called immediately. Eleanor, you just focus on your recovery. I bowed my head deeply at the Reverend's reassuring words. With this, my parents' resting place would be protected. Just after hanging up, as if on cue, my phone rang loudly. The screen showed Grayson's name. With a heart already frozen, I pressed the answer button. Oh, Eleanor, still alive, I see. Sabrina said she saw you. How was it? Impressed by the picture of my handsome son? Something you'll never have, you barren woman. Grayson's voice from the other end of the phone sounded slightly drunk and very cheerful. From the background, elegant piano music, like in a high-end restaurant, could be heard, along with the faint sound of clinking plates. He must be enjoying a lavish dinner with Sabrina using my money. I continued to listen to his words without emotion. In total silence, oblivious to my silence, Grayson continued his vile tirade. You're just now realizing what a hindrance you've been in my life, aren't you? 45 years old and a brain tumor, what a joke. I'm at the peak of my career. Everyone around me is happy, surrounded by lovely wives and children. Meanwhile, I have to see your gloomy face at home. You'll never understand how miserable I've felt all this time. Grayson continued to speak with the tone of a victim. How foolish this man was, completely unaware that for 15 years I had provided financial support behind the scenes to cover his small salary, paid off his parents' large debt, and continued to send a monthly allowance. His words just sounded ridiculous. His harsh words continued. Besides, you've always been boring and had no charm as a woman. Look at Sabrina. With her youth and beauty, she gave birth to a son who inherited my superior genes. My dignity as a man is preserved thanks to Sabrina. You're just a leech living comfortably off my hard-earned money, just cooking at home. From now on, all my hard-earned money will be for Sabrina and our son. You won't get a single cent of my hard-earned money. Hearing the words he spoke with such confidence, I almost. So, what's the occasion today? I asked in a voice as cold as ice. Grayson clicked his tongue. You ungrateful woman. Anyway, I was planning to buy a new car for Sabrina and our son. The parking in the penthouse now only has my sports car. It's not practical for family outings. I want to buy a luxury family car in cash. The highest model. Hearing Grayson's words, I felt more than just amused. I was even impressed. The debit card from the joint account, which came from my personal assets, he treated like his own bottomless wallet. He said he wanted to buy it in cash. In reality, his actual bank account probably only had a few $100s left. So I wanted to move a little money from my account and tried to pay with the card I usually use. But why did an error message appear? You didn't do anything funny, did you? If you dare to touch my money, I will never forgive you. I have to pay the dealer tomorrow. With those words, I understood everything. My lawyer had moved quickly, and the procedure to freeze the family card held by Grayson and the joint account I funded was complete. I sighed slowly. The cold, early March night wind came in from the slightly open room window and caressed my cheek. Oh, is that so? I don't know anything about a card error. Maybe you misremembered. What did you say? It's impossible that I'm wrong. Anyway, I'll check directly at the bank teller tomorrow. You're useless now, so hurry up and get out of the hospital and out of that apartment. We're going to live the best life from now on. Don't be a nuisance, you useless woman. After saying that unilaterally, he hung up the phone abruptly. The monotonous electronic tone echoed in the quiet room. Useless, nuisance, leech. The string of insults he threw echoed coldly in my head. But strangely, there was not a hint of sadness. All there was a cold anticipation of the devastating revenge that would soon begin. The reality he would face at the bank teller tomorrow that his account only had a trivial balance, all his reliable credit cards were blocked, and the absolute fact that the money he had been spending like water was entirely from my personal assets. Tomorrow, that man's thin pride and his false happiness would be shattered to pieces. I lay in bed and stared at the cold moon outside the window. The gates of hell were about to open, but Grayson's despair would not end with just money problems. He had not even the slightest clue that the situation he feared most was quietly unfolding behind the scenes. A cold spring rain beat hard against the hospital room window. A bone-chilling early March morning. The wound from my surgery ached slightly, perhaps due to the low air pressure. I tensed up in bed. A night had passed, and the time for Grayson to face the reality that his card was unusable at the bank teller was drawing near. I waited for that moment calmly, but the situation unfolded in a direction far worse than I had imagined. The phone on the side table rang loudly. The screen showed Grayson's name and a video call icon. I slowly sat up and pressed the answer button. On the screen was the spacious living room of the luxury penthouse in New York that I had bought in cash. But looking at its condition, I held my breath. On the floor, my clothes, books, and favorite dinnerware were scattered pathetically, and several large black trash bags were piled up. Oh, Eleanor, good morning. How is it? A beautiful sight, isn't it? The room feels much brighter after your boring stuff is gone, Grayson said from the other side of the screen with a wicked laugh. Behind him, Sabrina was wearing a luxury brand coat she had pulled from my closet and posing in front of the mirror. Oh my, Gray, the design of this coat is so old-fashioned. Eleanor's taste is really tacky, but, well, if we take it to a secondhand shop, maybe it can add a little money for our honeymoon later. Sabrina's shrill laugh echoed from the phone's speaker into the hospital room. Seeing those two treating the coat I cherished like trash, I felt my stomach turn cold and nauseous. But what truly mentally distressed me were the unexpected people who appeared on the screen next. Oh, Miss Sabrina, don't touch that dirty woman's clothes. The germs might transfer to my precious grandchild. It's dangerous, you know. The face of Grayson's mother, my mother-in-law, appeared from the corner of the screen. Behind her, my father-in-law also appeared, standing awkwardly. Why were my in-laws, who were supposed to be living quietly in their hometown in Pennsylvania, in New York, and moreover, in my apartment? To my bewilderment, my mother-in-law looked at me with eyes full of hatred from across the screen. Eleanor, you're still alive, you shameless woman. Grayson told us everything. A failure of a daughter-in-law like you who can't have children. We won't allow you to set foot in our family again. A wonderful woman like Miss Sabrina who can give birth to a great heir. She is our real family. You're just a jinx. A torrent of curses came from my mother-in-law's mouth. Even though I had paid off their huge debt and continued to send them a $2,500 monthly allowance, not only did they repay my kindness with evil, but they also colluded with my husband's mistress to kick me out of my house. Thank you so much, Mom. I will make Gray and also you and Dad happy, Sabrina said in a feigned tone, snuggling up to my mother-in-law who smiled broadly and flirtatiously. I fell silent, clutching my phone tightly. Not because I couldn't find the words to reply. I couldn't even make a sound because my anger was frozen, seeing how ungrateful and shallow these people were. Hey, Eleanor, you can't say anything. finally realized how pathetic you are? Grayson, who took my silence as a total defeat, shouted triumphantly from across the screen. Right, I'll show you the best place for you. Grayson walked to the back of the living room holding the phone, and the camera captured something most precious to me. The photo album of memories with my late parents and my father's antique clock were all just thrown into a dirty cardboard box. Stop it, a hoarse voice came from my mouth. Money or the apartment didn't matter. But the precious memories with my parents, I didn't want them to be touched by those dirty hands. From my hospital bed, I had no way to stop them physically. That overwhelming helplessness pushed me to the brink of despair. Stop it, you say? Don't be ridiculous. This junk from dead people brings bad luck to our new home. I'm throwing it in the trash now. Your parents must also regret dying and leaving behind a useless daughter like you. Yes, just send my regards so they can see the pathetic end of their daughter in hell. Along with Grayson's insulting words, my mother-in-law and Sabrina's vulgar laughter overlapped. They were convinced they had completely broken my heart and ended the video call with satisfaction. A click was followed by the screen going dark, and silence returned to the hospital room. I hugged my trembling shoulders in the cold bed. The frustration of not being able to protect precious things, blocked by the wall of physical distance, almost made my tears fall. But I wiped those tears away firmly. They had made a fatal mistake. They had crossed a line that should not be crossed in my precious territory. Just as I was about to press the nurse's call button, my phone vibrated again. On the screen was an incoming call from my personal lawyer who had been managing my assets for a long time. Hello, sir. Miss Vance. Just now, all arrangements have been completed. The termination of money transfers to your in-laws, the suspension of credit card use, and the freezing of the account were all carried out at 9 a.m. this morning. And there's one more important report. The results of the accelerated background check on Sabrina revealed a shocking fact. I held my breath, hearing the lawyer's low, tense voice. While they were partying, the footsteps of destruction had been approaching from behind them. The lawyer's heavy voice echoed from the phone's speaker in the quiet room. Miss Vance, please listen carefully, and don't be shocked. The 1-year-old boy that Sabrina gave birth to, after we secretly conducted a DNA test, has been proven not to be Mr. Grayson's child. This unexpected, shocking fact made me hold my breath. Sabrina had deceived Grayson with another man's child, claiming it as his son and parasitizing him. And Grayson, who fully believed the lie, had gleefully cast me aside. How ridiculous this situation was. A dry laugh began to emerge from my frozen heart. There's an even more important fact. Mr. Grayson, at the company where he works, has been claiming that the penthouse and properties belonging to you, Miss Vance, are his assets and has been trying to take out a large personal loan from the company. How foolish. There was no way he could unilaterally use property in my name as collateral. But his madness didn't stop there. Miss Vance, actually, today I have brought someone special to see you. He should be arriving shortly. Just after the lawyer said that, a soft knock was heard. After I answered, please come in, the door opened, and a middle-aged man in a high-quality suit appeared. Seeing his face, I was wide-eyed. Mr. Davenport, why are you here? He was Mr. Arthur Davenport, the president of the company where my husband, Grayson, worked. The president approached my bedside and bowed so deeply that his head almost touched the floor. Miss Vance, this time, our foolish employee has caused a lot of trouble. I am truly sorry. I was worried about your condition, but I'm relieved to see your face. Why was the president of my husband's company apologizing so humbly to me, an ordinary housewife? That was my other big secret, completely unknown to Grayson. My late father's real estate company owned many commercial buildings in prime locations in New York. One of them was the magnificent office building towering in the city center. That place was currently leased entirely by Mr. Davenport's company as their headquarters. In other words, I was the owner of the building where Grayson worked. And more than that, due to the relationship since my father's time, I was also one of the main shareholders of the company. If I wanted to, I could have canceled the building's lease and made Grayson's company homeless. I held absolute power. Actually, that man named Grayson brought a woman named Sabrina and a baby and boasted that he was the next company president. Worse, he openly insulted you, Miss Vance, within the company, calling you a useless, barren woman, a pathetic leech clinging to my money, and so on. Mr. Davenport clenched his fist in annoyance, his face tense. To Miss Vance, our main shareholder and most valued benefactor, such vile insults are completely unforgivable. We are preparing to fire him immediately. At that moment, as if on cue, my phone rang loudly. On the screen, Grayson's name shone. I gestured with my eyes to Mr. Davenport, pressed the answer button, and activated speaker mode. Hey, Eleanor, what did you do to my credit card? All the stores are declining it. I was humiliated at the car dealership earlier. Grayson's angry shout echoed throughout the hospital room. Mr. Davenport's eyebrows twitched. You useless piece of trash. Do you think you can just touch my money? Unblock it now. If not, I'll come to the hospital and beat you up. A string of incredibly vile insults. I showed no emotion on my face, just stared at the cold screen in deep silence. Seeing that I didn't reply a single word and remained mysteriously silent, Grayson became even more agitated and continued to scream, "Just stay silent. You weird woman, you should have just died. I'm going to eat fancy sushi with Sabrina now. You can eat that smelly hospital food for the rest of your life, you lowly, meddling woman." The call was abruptly cut. In the now quiet room, Mr. Davenport trembled with anger. "Miss Vance, such vile insults cannot be tolerated any longer. Tomorrow morning when he comes to work, I will end everything." I slowly shook my head. "No, Mr. Davenport. Just firing him is too light. He must feel the despair as everything under his feet crumbles, when he realizes how arrogant the illusion he lived in was." With a cold and clear voice, I made a terrifying proposal to Mr. Davenport. "Tomorrow morning, I will also come to your company. In front of all the employees, I will tear apart the thin pride he cherishes most, down to its very roots." Outside the window, the cold spring rain had completely stopped, and a sharp light began to peek through the clouds. The time had come for my hidden great power to finally reveal itself. The next morning, under a clear blue sky and the crisp early March air, I got a temporary pass from the doctor for a few hours and got into a black sedan. My destination was the headquarters office building of the company where my husband, Grayson, worked. In other words, the giant office building towering in a prime downtown location that I personally owned and leased entirely to their company. In the seat next to me, Mr. Davenport, who had visited my room yesterday, was also present. He looked very tense and full of regret, repeatedly wiping the sweat from his forehead with an expensive handkerchief. I calmly stared at the scenery outside the window, thinking about the beginning of the great drama that was about to unfold. Meanwhile, Grayson himself was doing something unbelievable in the vast company lobby. Somehow, he had brought his mistress, Sabrina, and the baby with whom he had no blood relation, and was forcefully detaining coworkers arriving during the morning rush hour, showing them off while telling his story in a loud voice. "Hey everyone, look, this is my real family. Sabrina is young and beautiful, and she even gave birth to a great heir who inherited my superior genes. A far cry from my useless wife. She's a 4-5-year-old failure being treated in the hospital for a brain tumor. Just a leech living off my money. Today, I'm filing for divorce, and as the man who will lead this company, I'm starting a brilliant new life." Seeing Grayson's absurd behavior of bringing a mistress to the sacred workplace, his colleagues were completely shocked and whispered to each other while looking at him with disdain. However, Grayson and Sabrina, who felt they were the center of the world, were completely oblivious to the cold reaction around them. Sabrina, also in a luxury brand outfit probably bought with my money, looked at the employees arrogantly. "Gray's ex-wife is really pathetic and pitiful. No charm as a woman, sick and a burden to Gray. If I were her, I'd be ashamed to be alive. From now on, we will lead you as the leaders of this company. So just relax." Their vile laughter echoed unpleasantly in the marble lobby. Suddenly, the front automatic doors opened with a whoosh, and a middle-aged couple rushed in, flustered. They were Grayson's parents, my in-laws. Their appearance was very different from when they were arrogant on the phone yesterday. Disheveled hair, out of breath, and completely panicked. "Grayson, it's an emergency. Since this morning, suddenly a lot of bills from our business partners have come, and even some scary people came to the house to collect debts. The monthly allowance of $2,500 that is usually transferred this month hasn't come in at all. What is going on? If this continues, we could go bankrupt and have to run. Help us." Faced with the sudden situation, Grayson clicked his tongue with an annoyed face. "Huh? What are you talking about, Mom?" "The allowance matter? I've left it all to that useless Eleanor. Has she become senile after being hospitalized? Can't even handle a simple money transfer. What a useless piece of trash. But don't worry, I am the future president. Not with petty company money, but with my vast personal assets, I will pay it all off." Saying that, Grayson arrogantly took out his gold credit card and tried to give payment instructions over the phone to somewhere. However, He had not yet realized the bitter reality that all his cards had been completely blocked, and the balance in his account was only a few $100s. Panicked in-laws, Grayson pretending to be calm, and Sabrina starting to get annoyed because she didn't understand the situation. The lobby became very chaotic, and the newly arrived employees could only watch the drama from a distance. Damn it. What is this? The card is malfunctioning again. Is the machine broken? Hey, you there, get me some cash. I'm like the owner of this building. Don't you know you can't follow my orders? As he began to arrogantly give orders to his subordinates, the heavy door of the special executive elevator at the back of the lobby opened with a soft sound. What came out was Mr. Davenport with a pale face and bitten lip, and slightly behind him, walking gracefully, was me. Although just recovering, I wore a well-made, solid black suit and walked with an upright posture. Seeing my appearance, the previously noisy air in the lobby instantly froze. I did not change my expression at all, just stared at them who were playing out their ridiculous drama in deep silence. In the face of that extraordinary and pressing silence, the employees around one by one made way, and a straight path opened up before me. "Oh, Eleanor, you ran away from the hospital, huh?" Grayson, upon seeing me, made a very wrong interpretation and smiled cynically. "What? You came to apologize for blocking my card as you pleased, even bringing the director with you? How dramatic. You're afraid of being dumped by me, aren't you? But it's too late. A leech-like woman like you, even if you grovel before everyone here, I will never forgive you." Next to Grayson, Mr. Davenport's body trembled violently with anger at those foolish and ungrateful words. However, I gently restrained him with my hand and directed a gaze as cold as ice straight into Grayson's eyes. "Now, let's shatter that thin floor of your arrogance to pieces." In the middle of the vast marble-floored entrance lobby, under the gaze of dozens of employees coming to work, Grayson, standing before me, wore a hideously distorted and satisfied smile. "Eleanor, you deliberately brought the director here to beg me, didn't you? But it's too late. I'm different from a barren woman like you who's about to be thrown away. I have Sabrina, the best young woman, and an heir who inherited my superior blood. Quickly, kneel here and unblock my card. If you do, maybe I'll still give you a little money to live on." Beside Grayson, Sabrina, clutching a luxury brand bag probably bought with my money, laughed cynically, as if to belittle me. "Eleanor, I don't know how pathetic and pitiful you are to come crawling here, but Gray is completely mine now. A great man like him is not for a leech like you, who is sickly and has no womanly charm. Quickly hand over all your assets as compensation and disappear forever from our glorious life." Behind them, my in-laws, who had been terrified by the debt collectors, upon seeing me, immediately approached with bulging eyes. "Eleanor, how dare you stop our allowance? What do you mean as the wife of the eldest son? Are you trying to kill us? Quickly prepare $250,000 in cash now. You're a useless jinx. Hurry up, or we'll be killed by loan sharks." An unimaginable and selfish string of insults was thrown by the four of them. Dozens of employees surrounding us held their breath, watching the truly tragic drama, completely silent. Everyone was horrified by the madness of that abnormal family. However, I did not change my expression at all. I just stared at them with a gaze as clear and cold as ice, without moving a muscle in deep silence. Not anger or sadness, just an infinite pity for how foolish humans can be for their thin desires and pride, spread quietly in the depths of my heart. The cold March morning sunlight struck the side of my overly calm face, making it appear white. My strange silence they took as their absolute victory, and that I was at a loss for words with fear. Grayson became more excited and began to shout in a loud voice that echoed throughout the lobby. "Hey, all of you, listen carefully. This woman is a useless leech who for 15 years has lived comfortably off my hard-earned money. A failure who couldn't have children and finally collapsed from a brain tumor. Today, I'm completely casting this trash woman aside and building a new family with Sabrina by my side. And as the next leader of this company, I am the man who will lead you strongly." Just after that insane declaration echoed futilely in the lobby, Mr. Davenport, standing beside me, who had been holding back his anger with all his might until his whole body trembled, finally reached his limit. "Enough." Mr. Davenport's mighty roar, coming from the bottom of his heart, echoed like thunder in the marble lobby. Due to that tremendous pressure, Grayson, who was at the peak of his arrogance, jumped in surprise, and Sabrina and my in-laws instantly lost their words and froze. The employees around were also surprised by the sudden outburst of anger from the president, known for his friendliness, and collectively took a step back. Sir, Mr. Director, what's wrong? I was just telling the bitter truth to my crazy ex-wife here. Grayson tried to defend himself with a tense face and a sycophantic smile, but Mr. Davenport cut him off harshly and stared at Grayson with a sharp gaze like a demon. It seems you have no idea to whom you are throwing such insults. A leech, a piece of trash, how dare you utter such shameless and vile words? Mr. Davenport took a deep breath. Then, in front of all the assembled employees and also Grayson and his family, he announced the shocking fact that no one had ever suspected. Everyone, listen carefully. Miss Eleanor Vance, who stands here, is not an ordinary housewife. She is the legal owner of the entire giant office building that we lease as our headquarters. The moment that word was spoken, the air in the lobby completely froze. Grayson's face slowly turned pale, then gray. Sabrina and my mother-in-law could only gape, completely unable to understand the meaning of the president's words, frozen like statues. Not only that, Miss Vance, since her late father's time, has continuously supported our company with very large funds. She is our benefactor and also our main shareholder. In other words, the survival of our company, it is no exaggeration to say, depends on a single decision from Miss Vance. To the esteemed Miss Vance, how dare you, a mere employee of this company, insult her as a leech and useless? This is an absolutely unforgivable act and deserves the heaviest punishment. Faced with a reality that was too shocking and illogical, Grayson fell to his knees while trying to argue in a trembling voice. Mr. Director, you must be joking. Eleanor, the owner of this building, the main shareholder? Such nonsense is impossible. She's just a poor housewife who lives off my small salary. I'm the one who pays the monthly rent and lets her live in that luxury penthouse. Mr. Director, you must have been deceived by this woman's wicked lies. Come to your senses. Hearing Grayson's pathetic and ridiculous defense, I finally slowly opened my mouth. My calm and firm voice cut through the tense, cold, early March air, echoing throughout the silent lobby. Grayson, you are truly a foolish and hopeless person. Hearing my cold words, Grayson looked at me with a desperate expression. The absolute power I had hidden for 15 years to protect his small ego and the false superiority he had believed in without a doubt, both now completely reversed with a cracking sound. The indisputable reality revealed by Mr. Davenport plunged the vast office building lobby into total silence. The cold, early March morning sun pierced through the large glass windows, mercilessly highlighting Grayson's pale face as he sat limply on the floor. Dozens of employees who had just arrived for work witnessed how their arrogant colleague was, in fact, an extraordinarily shameless person, and they were at a loss for words. Eleanor, there's no way you're the owner of this building. Such a bluff won't work. Mr. Director, don't be fooled. This woman is just an ordinary housewife who lives as a parasite on my hard work, a lowly human. I'm the one who pays the rent every month and lets her live in that luxury apartment. Believe me. Grayson continued to shout with a trembling voice, his face tense. His small pride resisted with all its might the reality that the wife he had looked down upon was, in fact, the absolute power holder looking down on him. Beads of sweat the size of corn kernels poured from his forehead, showing how anxious he was. Staring at Grayson's pathetic figure, I again maintained a cold and calm silence. My silence to him was perhaps the most terrifying sign of agreement. Grayson's breath became irregular, and he looked around with a pleading gaze, but no one would meet his eyes. Grayson, what does this mean? This building belongs to Eleanor? Isn't this a joke? Aren't you the future CEO and a rich man? You promised to take all the assets from a barren woman like Eleanor and make me and this child happy. Sabrina, also unable to comprehend the situation, shook Grayson's arm hard while screaming shrilly. In her eyes was the fear that the luxurious future she had believed in without a doubt was now collapsing. Shut up, Sabrina. There must be a mistake. Eleanor, you must have stolen my money and bribed the director. Yes, you cunning leech, I will never forgive you. Just as Grayson's words, still insulting me, were about to continue, the sound of quiet leather footsteps was heard from the lobby entrance. What appeared was my personal lawyer who had long managed my assets, the one I had discussed with in the hospital room yesterday. He took out several sheets of documents from his thick leather bag and threw them coldly in front of Grayson and the others. Mr. Grayson, I will not legally allow you to continue insulting my client, Miss Vance, with baseless words. Here are copies of the property ownership certificates belonging to Miss Vance and the proof of purchase for the penthouse where you live. Everything was bought in cash with personal assets inherited by Miss Vance before marriage. Your name being listed is just a formality. The lawyer's low, intimidating voice and the official documents presented made Grayson, with trembling hands, pick up the document and read it greedily. And as he saw the truth written there, as if all the air in his lungs was sucked out, he lost his words and completely collapsed on the marble floor. Then I opened my mouth calmly. A voice colder than the piercing March wind rained down on them. Grayson, the rent you thought you paid every month, the designer suit you're wearing now, the money you used to drink in luxury hotels every night with Sabrina, it was all money I secretly transferred from my private account to the joint account so as not to hurt your pride. Your own real salary is nothing compared to the amount I earn every month. Hearing my cold confession, Grayson looked at me with empty eyes like a zombie. So my credit card doesn't work because… Yes, of course, because of me. I stopped all fund flows from my account completely. So, your card is now just a useless piece of plastic. The cash you have is at most a few $100s, right? Buying a family car in cash is an impossible thing. Upon hearing those words, the mother-in-law who had been listening to the situation's development shrieked hysterically. Wait a minute. So the one who paid off the $250,000 debt when our company almost went bankrupt, the one who sent $2,500 every month to our account back home, it wasn't the great Grayson, but you? To my mother-in-law, who approached with bulging eyes, I smiled coldly and nodded deeply. Yes, that's right. The one you keep insulting as a useless woman, a leech, a failure, am the one holding your lifelines. But yesterday, you cut ties with me, right? The money transfers have been stopped forever. Please ask your proud son to pay off the entire debt from the loan sharks who will be coming soon. My in-laws turned deathly pale with despair and sat down limply, trembling violently, chased by debt collectors with the certainty of bankruptcy and having to flee. The arrogance they had shown just moments ago was nowhere to be found on their faces. Only deep regret and fear were etched there. No way, Gray. You said you were elite and rich. That's why I chose you. A poor, debt-ridden man like this is worthless. Sabrina hysterically clutched Grayson's chest and began to cry. Her cunning plan had completely failed. Her intention to snatch a rich husband turned out to be just an incompetent, arrogant, and penniless man. Sabrina, calm down. I didn't know either. This woman has been deceiving me all this time. I'm innocent. The sight of 3 people blaming and insulting each other horribly. The employees around just stared at the ridiculous scene with cold eyes. However, their hell had just begun. The biggest bomb I had prepared had not yet exploded. I exchanged a glance with my lawyer and nodded slightly. The lawyer took out another sealed brown envelope from his bag. Sabrina, I already knew you were a gold digger who approached Grayson for his money, but you also told a big lie to Grayson, didn't you? Hearing my ice-cold words, Sabrina's hysterical movements of hitting Grayson stopped completely. Her face instantly turned deathly pale. The contents of the envelope held by my lawyer were the conclusive evidence that would socially destroy this evil woman and plunge Grayson into an even deeper abyss of despair. The brown envelope held by the lawyer and his mysterious presence made the air in the vast office building lobby even heavier and colder. Sabrina's hysterical movements of clutching Grayson's chest while crying and demanding her rich husband stopped completely as if doused with ice. Her face turned deathly pale, and the skin under her thick makeup was clearly turning gray. Sabrina, I already knew you were a gold digger who approached Grayson for his money, but you also told a big lie to Grayson, didn't you? My ice-cold words pierced the sharp, cold morning air of March. Sabrina took a step back and tried to cover her nervousness with a trembling voice. What? What lie did I tell? I sincerely love Gray and even gave birth to this cute son for him. Something extraordinary that a barren woman like you could never do, Eleanor. Don't make baseless accusations. I was truly disgusted to see she still had the nerve to utter such vile words. I just looked at the lawyer next to me with a cold, wordless gaze. Receiving my silent cue accurately, the lawyer slowly tore the seal of the brown envelope and took out several sheets of an official examination report. Miss Sabrina, the 1-year-old boy you claim to be Mr. Grayson's heir and proudly carry around. Yesterday, we secretly conducted a DNA test through our investigative agency. The result is a comparison between the data Mr. Grayson once submitted during a company health checkup and your child's hair that was left behind. DNA test. As the sharp word came out, Grayson's body trembled, and Sabrina covered her face with both hands, holding her breath. Dozens of employees watching from a distance were also glued to the development of the increasingly murky drama. To get straight to the point, no biological relationship was found between this child and Mr. Grayson, meaning he is not Mr. Grayson's biological child. The test results show 0%. He is the child of someone else. The lawyer's calm and cruel announcement echoed on the silent marble floor. Grayson's eyes widened as far as they could go, staring at Sabrina and the baby she was holding repeatedly, as if seeing something unbelievable. "Hey, Sabrina, it's not possible, right? What is this? Isn't this child the fruit of our true love? My precious heir who inherited my superior blood? The large amount of money I gave you every month for his milk and care, and for your allowance. What was all that for? Answer me, Sabrina." Facing Grayson's desperate shouts, Sabrina, realizing that her escape route was completely blocked, instantly changed her attitude. She roughly placed the baby she was holding on the sofa, then looked at Grayson with a condescending gaze and laughed cynically. "Ha, fruit of love? Superior blood? Don't be stupid. Do you think I'd want to have a child with a low-paid, ordinary employee with no redeeming qualities like you? This child is the precious result of my relationship with the most popular guy at my favorite nightclub. But he ran away after leaving me because he had no money. That's why I deceived you, who happened to be crazy about me and had a lot of money, making you a convenient source of money." Hearing such a selfish and cruel truth from Sabrina's mouth, Grayson fell to his knees and held his head with both hands. "Besides, I believed and followed you because you yourself boasted of being a rich CEO. It turns out you're just a poor, pathetic man acting big with Eleanor's money. Do you think I really fell in love with a worthless man like you? Don't get me wrong. Your arrogant attitude has disgusted me from the start. Give me back my life. You useless man." Sabrina's merciless string of insults shattered Grayson's thin pride to pieces. He thought he had lived by looking down on his wife, boasting about his mistress and her child. But in reality, he was also looked down upon by his mistress as a lowly human and for years had financed another man's unknown child with my money. Was there a tragedy more ridiculous and pathetic than this? I've been deceived by this woman all this time and spent money on another man's child, betrayed Eleanor, shouldered my parents' debt, and lost everything. Grayson collapsed on the cold floor and began to roar like a wild animal. Behind him, my in-laws were on the verge of fainting with their eyes rolled back in despair. They also seemed to be mentally crushed by the fact that their star son turned out to be penniless, and the baby they thought was their precious grandchild was someone else's. I just stared at the tragic scene of hell with a calm, emotionless gaze. Their peaceful life, which I had painstakingly protected for 15 years, had been completely destroyed in a few days by their own greed and stupidity. From the employees around, whispers of pity and mockery of serves him right were heard towards Grayson. However, my revenge was not over. The insults they threw at me and their sin of trying to desecrate the precious grave of my parents could not be redeemed with just this. "Mr. Davenport," I broke the long silence and called the president standing beside me with a firm voice. The president straightened his back and nodded deeply. "Yes, Miss Vance, any order will be carried out immediately." Grayson and Sabrina's faces tensed with fear. They finally understood that the decision I was about to make would determine the rest of their lives. The time had come to present the last and biggest fact to drop them to the bottom of hell. "Mr. Davenport, carry out his punishment as planned." My calm and cruel command echoed in the lobby, which was shrouded in the cold, early March air. As if waiting for those words, Mr. Davenport nodded deeply, and in front of all the employees, he delivered the final, merciless verdict to Grayson, who was sprawled on the marble floor. "You are, as of this moment, dishonorably discharged from this company. You have committed fraud by claiming the assets of Miss Vance, a benefactor of this company and the true owner of this building, as your own and attempting to take out a large illegal loan from the company, attempted fraud. In addition, past embezzlement of company expenses has also been identified. For all of this, we have reported it to the police. You will not only be an unemployed person with no money, but you will also live the rest of your miserable life as a criminal. Dishonorable discharge, fraud, police." The series of heavy, terrifying words completely shattered Grayson's face. He rolled his eyes, saliva drooled from his mouth, and he began to shake his head convulsively. "Sir, Mr. Director, it's a lie, right? I'm being fired? A criminal? Impossible. Eleanor, hey Eleanor, please say something. Haven't we been married for 15 years? I was wrong. You are the most precious. This useless woman and this other man's child, I'll get rid of them right away. Please don't leave me." The man who had just moments ago looked down on me as a leech and insulted me with a loud voice was now trying to crawl at my feet, reaching out his hand desperately. I kicked that dirty hand away with the tip of my shoe coldly and maintained a deep, emotionless silence. My cold gaze, which just stared at him without a word, served as a death sentence more cruel than the harshest curses. Intimidated by my overwhelming silence, Grayson let out a pathetic scream and crawled backward on the floor. Seeing such a shameful sight, Sabrina was the first to come to her senses. She tried to run away as quickly as possible from the man who was about to become a penniless fraudster and criminal, and began to insult Grayson with a shrill voice. "Don't be ridiculous. You want to make me your criminal accomplice? You're the one who lied to me, claiming to be a rich CEO. You useless poor man. Eleanor, I'm innocent. This liar is the one who deceived me. I'm just a poor victim. Besides, the suit you're wearing so proudly, it's all Eleanor's money. You yourself are worthless. You lowly piece of trash. I've been disgusted by you from the start." Sabrina's overly selfish betrayal and harsh insults, which fundamentally denied his value of existence, triggered the last snap of Grayson's sanity. He stood up with red eyes like a wild animal and blindly lunged at Sabrina's neck as she tried to run away. "Don't be ridiculous, you gold digger. You're the one who seduced me and lied that another man's child was my heir and extorted money from me, right? Because of you, I lost my wife, my job, and my money. I'll kill you right here. Stop, let go. Somebody catch this crazy, lowly man." In the middle of the beautiful office building lobby, two people who once swore eternal happiness were now clawing at each other's faces, pulling hair, and fighting ugly like wild dogs. To make matters worse, my in-laws, who had been sitting in despair, joined in hysterically. "You foolish son, because of you, we're going to be killed by loan sharks. You've ruined your parents' lives, you ungrateful jinx son. This is all because you were deceived by that cheap woman and betrayed Eleanor. How are you going to take responsibility for us?" Screams and shouts and the cries of the baby lying on the floor echoed futilely in the marble space. Dozens of employees just stared at the ridiculous and tragic scene of hell with cold eyes. No one tried to help them. I took a deep breath. The cold, early March air filled my lungs. They were now, with their thin desires and lies completely peeled away, dragging each other into the abyss of destruction with their own hands. Without my direct intervention, they were already in a state of total panic and sliding quickly down the path of self-destruction. However, an unexpected figure suddenly appeared, adding a final touch to the chaotic drama. The heavy front automatic doors opened, and a flamboyant young man in an expensive designer suit entered the lobby, followed by several tough-looking men. As soon as he saw Sabrina's face in the middle of the fight, he laughed wickedly and shouted, "Oh, so you're here! I was able to find you right away because you were showing off on social media about getting married again to a rich director and living a luxurious life. It seems you've been living well by using my son, huh? Your debt at my club and the loan from me total $100,000. I've been waiting for you because you said you got a rich husband. Now it's time for you to pay up." Upon seeing the man's face, Sabrina's face turned as pale as a corpse, and she collapsed on the spot, trembling. It turned out the flamboyant man was the biological father of the baby Sabrina had been showing off, and he had come all this way to this company to collect the large debt Sabrina had left behind. What? $100,000 debt? Sabrina, what does this mean? Just after Grayson rolled his eyes at the completely incomprehensible situation and his mother-in-law completely fainted, the deafening sound of sirens approached quickly from outside the building, as if to drop them deeper into hell. The strong red light from the flashing lights illuminated the glass lobby fiercely, and several police officers entered in unison from the automatic doors with tense expressions. Their total destruction had finally reached its inevitable final act. The strong red light from the flashing lights pierced the cold glass windows of the office building, illuminating the vast marble lobby with an eerie nuance. The deafening siren sound stopped abruptly in front of the main entrance, and several police officers stepped in from the automatic doors with tense expressions. In their hands, they held silver handcuffs that gleamed coldly. The bone-chilling early March air blew in mercilessly from the open automatic doors, cooling the marble floor as if it were creeping. That cold air seemed to be a form of my sharp and cold heart. The police officers unhesitatingly surrounded Grayson, who was crawling on the floor, watching the fight between Sabrina and the flamboyant man. "We received a report from President Davenport. You are requested to come with us for questioning on charges of embezzlement of company funds and attempted fraud against the company." Hearing the firm words of the police officer, Grayson completely panicked and began to fight back, swinging his hands wildly. "No, I was framed. I was just deceived by this woman, Sabrina the gold digger. I'm not a rich director. I'm just an ordinary employee." And all of that was this woman named Eleanor's money. I did nothing wrong. I was the leech. Let me go. I'm the CEO, you know. Finally, in front of all the employees, Grayson admitted to being a leech himself and shouted pathetic and shameful excuses. Gone were the arrogant, insulting words he had once thrown at me. Now, he was just a pathetic and ridiculous clown. Sabrina also, after her escape route was blocked by the flamboyant man and his tough-looking cronies, sat trembling on the floor. Wait a minute, I can't pay $100,000. That's right, Grayson. You're the one who has to pay it as compensation for deceiving me and ruining my life. It's only right that you bear this debt. You useless, lowly man. Don't be ridiculous. You're the one who spent my money to have fun with another man, right? Give me back my life, you cheap fraud. Even though they were about to be handcuffed, the two of them insulted each other with vile words and blamed each other horribly. I just stared at the tragic scene of hell calmly, without a trace of emotion. While Grayson and the others were arguing fiercely, I just stared back at them in silence. The silence, as cold as the deep sea, became the deadliest weapon that stabbed back all the harsh words they had ever thrown at me, right into their own hearts. Then Grayson, who was being held by the police, looked at me with red eyes and shouted pleadingly, as if it were his last lifeline. Eleanor, please tell the director to withdraw his report. Haven't we been married for 15 years? The divorce papers haven't been filed, right? I'm still your husband. Half of your vast fortune should be mine by right. Use that money to erase my sins. I was wrong. You are the best wife. Half of the best wife's fortune. How shallow he was, to immediately turn his palm over as soon as the situation became unfavorable. With deep disgust and pity, I slowly shook my head. Grayson, you are truly a foolish and hopeless person. My ice-cold voice split the noisy lobby. After you forced me to sign the divorce papers at the hospital, you went straight to the civil registry office with joy, didn't you? The divorce decree is already in my hands. We are truly strangers. Besides, all my assets are premarital assets that I inherited. So, you have no right to a single penny of it. The last glimmer of hope completely faded from Grayson's face. However, the greatest despair I had prepared for him was not just this. I nodded lightly towards the lawyer. The lawyer calmly walked over and spread the last thick document in front of Grayson. Mr. Grayson, this is the biggest fact I have to tell you today. Regarding the $250,000 debt your parents incurred 5 years ago, Mr. Grayson, Vance did say she had paid it off. But more precisely, Miss Vance's real estate company bought the debt from the loan sharks. Hearing the lawyer's words, my in-laws, who were on the verge of fainting, convulsed again. 5 years ago, when your parents were in debt for $250,000. At that time, under the pretext of opening a joint account for living expenses, I asked you to sign a few papers. You, without reading the documents I prepared, just arrogantly signed your name to show off. One of those papers was a contract to become a joint guarantor for your parents' debt, which my company had bought. I looked straight into Grayson's eyes, and without a shred of mercy, delivered the final verdict. Your parents' $250,000 debt and the $100,000 in damages for your infidelity to me. Total $350,000. As a joint guarantor, I demand full payment from you today. If you can't pay within a week, your parents' house and land back home will be seized and auctioned, and you yourself will experience a lifetime of collection hell that can't even be resolved by bankruptcy. A $350,000 debt, arrest by the police for embezzlement and fraud, and the betrayal of a trusted mistress and the revelation of a huge debt. Understanding everything, Grayson couldn't even speak anymore. He just opened and closed his mouth like a goldfish. Then his eyes rolled back and he collapsed, foaming at the mouth. Sabrina, too. Her hair was roughly pulled by the flamboyant man, screaming hysterically in fear of being sold to the lowest level of the nightlife to pay off her $100,000 debt. My in-laws, unable to bear the reality that the $250,000 debt had destroyed their beloved son, completely lost consciousness and lay on the floor. The price of their 15 years of living comfortably on my kindness and looking down on me as a useless woman had now been paid in full in a way that was too great and tragic. Grayson was dragged roughly by the police towards the patrol car. I just stared at his ridiculous back with cold eyes in silence. But my revenge scenario still had a little more to go. I had prepared the final scene of despair that they would see at the true bottom of hell. Grayson was dragged roughly across the marble floor by the strong arms of police officers. On his wrists, the cold, heavy silver handcuffs gleamed dimly. The image of the man who, just a few dozen minutes ago, had boasted of becoming the company's CEO, brought his mistress and her child, and insulted me as a leech, was gone. Disheveled hair, a face a mess with tears and snot, and knees that kept shaking with fear. That pathetic and shameful sight was etched in the eyes of all the employees as an unsalvageable clown. Let go! Let me go! I was framed. It's all this woman's fault, Sabrina. My life was supposed to be shining from now on. Eleanor, help! Help me! You're kind and always do what I want. This was just a small affair. Please take off these handcuffs. Grayson's shameless cries echoed futilely in the cold March air. I just watched the shameful scene in deep silence. I didn't even have the energy to be angry at the reality that the man I once loved was such a fragile and cowardly human being. Only a deep regret for dedicating 15 years of my life to this man, and a sense of farewell crossed my heart. Perhaps unable to bear my silence, Grayson screamed even louder, this time asking for help from the employees around him. Hey, what are you looking at? Help me. I've contributed to this company. This woman framed me because she was jealous of my position. Somebody! Stop the police! But what came back for Grayson's desperate plea was not a helping hand, but a cynical smile and a gaze of contempt as cold as ice. One of his colleagues, unable to stand it anymore, spat. Contributed? Don't be ridiculous. The branded goods and luxury watches you showed off every day with Miss Vance's money without working. We all called you a tacky nouveau rich behind your back. In the end, you embezzled company money and insulted your wife, who is our benefactor. You are a piece of trash. Starting with those words, a barrage of insults against Grayson was hurled from all around. Serves you right. Repent for the rest of your life in prison. Why didn't you realize that Miss Vance was too good for you? Grayson's thin pride was now shattered to pieces by the words of his former subordinates and colleagues, scattered on the marble floor. Meanwhile, Sabrina was also at the bottom of despair. The flamboyant man standing behind her, whose name was Victor, gripped Sabrina's slender wrist with a force that almost crushed it, and looked at her with eyes as cold as a snake. Sabrina, after making such a huge mess, do you think you can run from a $100,000 debt? The rich husband you were aiming for turned out to be just a penniless criminal. A miscalculation, wasn't it? Victor, please help me. What should I do with this child? I'll definitely find the money. Find it? How? A fraudulent woman like you won't be able to get a decent job. But don't worry, I've prepared a suitable place for you. You'll work until you die to pay me back in full. Victor said cruelly, then began to drag Sabrina roughly. Sabrina, holding the baby, cried and struggled. But surrounded by Victor's tough-looking henchmen, there was no place to run. Sabrina, who was once my best friend, listened to my complaints and accompanied me. I never thought that behind her smile hid such greed and cruelty. The word barren and the insult failure she had thrown at me now all returned as a fire that burned her. Glancing at that scene, I slowly walked in front of Grayson. Grayson, who was being held by the police with his forehead pressed to the floor, noticed my shadow and lifted his face. Eleanor, you're going to help me? I knew you would. Grayson, of course not. I just came to say my final goodbye to you, I said in a voice as cold as ice. What you think you've lost now was never yours to begin with. This building, the apartment, the position, the money, it was all an illusion I created with a lie called kindness, to match your lies and arrogance. You might have felt like you were standing on your own strength, but in reality, you were just a pathetic puppet dancing on the palm of my hand. Grayson's eyes widened with fear and despair. You called me a failure, right? But who is the real failure? You, who parasitized others' efforts, repaid kindness with evil, and tried to enjoy a life coated in lies. You are the one who is truly useless, not needed in this society or in anyone's life. Eleanor, don't say that, please. I was wrong. It's too late. Your parents are probably already kicked out of their house back home and wandering the streets. My lawyer has already completed the property seizure. Reflect on and regret every insult you threw at me for the rest of your lives. After saying that, I left Grayson without a single glance back. The police officers forcefully lifted Grayson's arms and took him out of the lobby. The heavy sound of the patrol car door closing echoed in the silent lobby. This was the sign of the end of my 15 years of patience and their false luxury. Only the cold March wind blew in the lobby. However, my heart was strangely at peace. After surviving a brain tumor operation and the brink of death, I no longer had any feelings to waste on lowly people like them. Mr. Davenport gently approached me. Miss Vance, you have truly worked hard. Such despicable people will be severely punished by the law. From now on, please prioritize your health and live peaceful days. Hearing the president's warm words, I was finally able to smile a little. But this story doesn't end here. The impact of this incident will spread further in unexpected ways. There is still a continuation to be told about the end of those who were destroyed. The deafening siren of the patrol car faded away, swallowed by the hustle and bustle of the city center. Several months have passed. The cold March wind is gone, and a vibrant summer has arrived with colorful flowers blooming in the city. The scar from my brain tumor surgery has healed remarkably well thanks to the skilled hands of the surgeon. There are no side effects at all. In fact, my head feels clearer than before, and I feel a strength flowing from within my body. I am now standing on the balcony of my penthouse apartment, enjoying a quiet afternoon with a gentle breeze caressing my cheek. On the table is tea brewed from the finest quality leaves and seasonal pastries made by a famous pastry chef. This is my real life, which for 15 years I had sacrificed to support that foolish man. Meanwhile, a tragic and unimaginable end awaited those who had betrayed, insulted, and tried to take everything from me. First, my ex-husband, Grayson. He was charged with embezzlement of company funds and attempted fraud and sentenced to prison. He is currently living a regulated but harsh life as a prisoner within the cold, damp walls of a prison. The designer suits he once wore with pride have been replaced with cheap gray work uniforms, and his neatly styled hair has been shaved short. The prison food is far simpler than the hospital food he once mocked, as smelly food, and every bite makes him realize how much he has lost. According to a report from my personal lawyer, Grayson cries every day in prison, calling my name to the walls. Eleanor, I'm sorry. Get me out of here. Hire the best lawyer with your money. We still love each other, right? To his shameful words, the prison guards just look at him with cynicism. In addition, the $350,000 debt, my in-laws' family debt that my company bought, and the damages to me has become a heavy burden for him. Even after getting out of prison, what awaits him is a lifetime of debt hell that can never be paid off and the stigma of being an ex-convict. And my best friend, Sabrina, her end was also very tragic. To pay off the $100,000 debt demanded by Victor, the flamboyant man, she was driven out of the glamorous places in the city center and sold to a rundown red light district in a remote area. The beauty and youth she hid behind thick makeup quickly faded due to forced labor and an irregular life every day. And now she is even afraid to look in the mirror. The designer bags and luxury accessories she prided herself on were all taken by Victor, and all that's left for her is a room in an old apartment and a despair that will never go away for the rest of her life. The baby, although acknowledged by Victor as his child, I heard was placed in an orphanage in a condition almost like child neglect. Sabrina, by the child she used to laugh at me with, has completely destroyed her own life. The saddest are Grayson's parents. Because my lawyer mercilessly seized their property, they lost their ancestral home and land in their hometown. They now live in a dilapidated wooden apartment in a corner of the city, forcing their old bodies to work as daily cleaners. My mother-in-law, who once insulted me as a useless woman and a failure, now bends down, crawling on the floor, picking up trash thrown by passers-by. The fact that their proud son turned out to be a criminal who just showed off with other people's money has shattered their pride to pieces. At night, in their cold blankets, they can only cry while remembering the $2,500 I used to send every month, which now feels like a dream. I put down the teacup in my hand, slowly. Whatever hell they are experiencing now, my heart does not tremble a bit. For 15 years, I had been devoted and patient more than enough for them. They were the ones who had trampled on that compassionate heart with their own greed and arrogance. Just then, a message came to my phone. It was from Mr. Davenport. Miss Vance, regarding the major renovation plan for the office building, there is an extraordinary proposal. And thanks to your support, our company is heading for a record high profit. How about we have lunch together this weekend to celebrate? I smiled a little and replied to his message. Around me now are only people who sincerely respect and appreciate me. By living honestly and not lying to myself, true happiness is what I have finally found at my age. Looking out the window, I can see my company's logo shining proudly on the roof of that office building. The power I once hid for Grayson now radiates gallantly to the whole world. I took a deep breath, inhaling the fresh May air. No need to look back anymore. Before me lies a bright and prosperous future, with no one to interfere. As far as the eye can see, however, as a true conclusion to this story, there is still one thing I have not completed. A report to my late parents. In front of my parents' grave, which Grayson and his gang had once intended to defile, I had made a vow in my heart. The gentle spring sunlight illuminated the quiet churchyard. At the end of March, the cherry blossom buds swelled as if about to bloom, showing signs of a soft pink color. After passing the great ordeal of a brain tumor and ending a 15-year false marriage myself, today I visited the church where my late parents rest. The holy water I took from the font reflected the spring light and sparkled. I walked slowly towards the family mausoleum. This sacred place, which Grayson and Sabrina had once intended to trample on to report their dirty desires, was now shrouded in deep silence and a sacred air. I placed fresh seasonal flowers in front of the tomb and lit a candle. The thin, white smoke rose straight to the blue sky. I slowly closed my eyes and clasped my hands in prayer. Father, Mother, it's been a long time. It's Eleanor. I have finally settled everything. The people who unjustly tarnished the name and honor that you, Father and Mother, protected and passed down to me, are no longer around me. I conveyed the words that overflowed from the bottom of my heart, one by one, to the spirits of my parents. I remembered visiting this place 15 years ago with the man named Grayson to report our marriage. At that time, I could not see the cunning nature hidden behind his fresh smile. I deeply regret my lack of judgment and for using the precious assets left by my parents for such a man. Then, the sound of rustling robes was heard from behind, and a soft voice called me. Eleanor, I'm glad you came. How are you? Are you well? Turning around, there stood the Reverend, the head of the family church, and also my father's friend, with a loving smile. I bowed my head deeply. Reverend, thank you so much for your help that time. Thanks to you, my parents' resting place was not defiled. The surgery was also successful, and I can walk on my own 2 feet like this. Thank God, your father and mother must be very happy. Actually, those people, before being arrested by the police, really came to the front gate of this church. The Reverend's expression briefly became serious. The man named Grayson and a flashy-looking woman. They banged on the gate, shouting that they were Eleanor's family and demanding to be let in with a very disrespectful attitude. However, as I promised your father, I forbade them from entering. Then, Grayson kicked the historic gate of this church and left, spewing rude curses. Hearing that story, I unconsciously let out a long sigh. Until the end, that man did not realize his foolishness and even rejected the protection of the divine. There is a saying about karma. Those who prey on the kindness of others and accumulate evil will one day surely be destroyed by the seeds they sow themselves. Eleanor, you no longer need to remember them for a second. From now on, bloom the beautiful flower of your own life with pride, like the cherry blossoms in this yard. The Reverend's warm words gently melted the deepest part of my heart that had been frozen like spring snow. Yes, thank you. I once again faced the tomb and bowed my head deeply. What my parents left me was not just abundant property and money, the strength and honor to not lose myself in any difficulty and to live righteously. That is my true inheritance. As I walked on the path to leave the church, I saw a cherry tree that had bloomed early next to the gate. Only a few blossoms were open. It was the light of a life that had survived the harsh winter cold and reached for the light with its own strength. I stopped and gently touched the beautiful petals with my fingertips. There were many things I wanted to do in my life ahead. Using my assets to establish a foundation for children suffering from diseases, preserving and passing on the cityscape my father loved to the next generation. And most importantly, to love, appreciate, and cherish myself sincerely while living each day with full awareness. By losing the man named Grayson, I gained the priceless wings of freedom. Whether he is now wallowing in despair on the cold prison floor, or Sabrina is working hard at the bottom of the nightlife, it's all a story from another world, distant and unrelated to me. I took a deep breath and looked up at the clear blue sky. The wind caressing my cheek was no longer cold. There was the definite warmth of spring and the breath of a new season. 15 years ago, I might have made the wrong choice. But the life that starts from this place today is a true story for myself, without a single blemish. I descended the long stone steps of the church with a light step. Below, a black sedan and reliable friends were waiting for me. With every step I took, my heart was filled with light and freed from burdens. Goodbye to my past and hello to my new life. Without a single glance back, I stepped forward into the shining city. On my back, there was no longer any doubt or sadness. My future, passing the rows of fully bloomed cherry trees, stretched out bright and free as far as the eye could see into the spring sky.